instruments you have just seen are part of a stage set, and the musicians who are playing them are actors in a drama. This is not a usual type of drama, but these are not usual instruments either, and the players are not usual actors. In the kind of drama you will see, there is no obligation to listen to the music or to search for any musical communication. There is, in fact, no obligation of any kind. All that is called for is the function of the senses, customary and relaxed. It is desirable to open the eyes and relax, to open the ears and relax. Nerve impulses sometimes travel at an amazing speed. And since the distance, the average distance between a pair of human ears is about 6 inches, only a small fraction of a second is required for music to go in one ear and out the other. Now, the demands of this modern life are excessively nervous ones, and modern ears have tended to establish a path between themselves about as straight as any path could be. And the arresting feature of this path is that it bypasses the brain completely. Thus, the brain is free to exercise itself independently, as, for example, in doing one's school homework by radio music, or in one's daydreams at the symphony concert. Now, I have a deeply serious purpose in talking in this way. Speaking metaphorically, I might say that my life has been dedicated to the throwing of a psychological block into that direct path between the ears, and forcing sounds to bounce around in the upper part of the cranium before they go out the other ear. And when this block is effective, all kinds of wonderful things happen. Nerve impulses quicken. The adrenal glands begin to secrete their ecstatic hormones. The pancreatic juices begin to ooze, and the normal peristalsis of a vegetable existence stops momentarily, completely. What is this psychological block? It could be many things, but among them is one that is introduced through the sense of seeing coupled with the sense of hearing. This visual element at its best might be called the movingly dramatic and the imaginatively theatrical. To be an effective agent in bringing about the involvement of the whole body in response, the senses of sight and sound must revolve around a single axis, and this axis is the dramatic motivation. Having arrived at this point, I would like to depart from the matter of a larger dramatic motivation for a moment to introduce the 4 unusual instruments you saw a moment ago and other instruments by means of photographs. The Diamond Marimba has 36 blocks and resonators arranged in a chordal way. Strokes with the right hand are major, with the left hand are minor. Now listen to a short passage on the Diamond Marimba played by Danlee Mitchell. Since I've started with the highest marimba, I'll go down the scale and introduce the boo, or bamboo marimba. This has 64 sections of Philippine bamboo and vibrating tongues cut in the ends. The player is Tom Gager. The instrument with the next lowest register, the marimba, is the bass marimba. This has this has 11 blocks of Sitka spruce and a resonator or air column under each. The principle of sound generation in the marimbas is the same throughout. A vibrating block of wood has a natural frequency, and this tone is amplified in the air column or resonator under it of the same natural frequency. The lowest tone on the bass marimba is a cello C. I'm sorry that I can't show you how these sounds are alone, but you will hear them later in the recorded tape with a complete ensemble of 17 actors, musicians from the University of Illinois. The marimba with the lowest register is the marimba eroica. 4 long blocks, the longest about 8 feet, and a large box-like resonator for each. These tones go very low. One of them is below any sound on the piano, and they verge on a sense of feeling. I'm afraid that television sets are not designed to reproduce such sounds, but they can be reproduced on the best hi-fi sets. The marimba eroica is played with very large, heavy, soft mallets and padded hands. This is the instrument that I call the cloud chamber bowls. The large pieces of glass are the tops and bottoms of Pyrex carboys and give a bell-like tone. I discovered them in the radiation laboratory of the University of California, where the centers were cut out for use in so-called cloud chamber experiments. This explains the name. Now the plucked string instruments. This is the Kithara, a large instrument some 7.5 feet high of the lyre type. It has 72 strings, and glass rods such as this are used for stopping the strings for high chords and for gliding tones. It's essentially an instrument of 12 chords of 6 strings each. In the music you will hear, 2 players are at the Kithara, one on each side on stands, and they use special picks and fingers. This is the instrument I call the harmonic canon in 2 halves, Castor and Pollux. Each half has 44 strings, and in the centers you see some very intricate bridges. Without these bridges, the 2 halves might be thought of as 2 white canvases on which a painter might begin to work. But with the bridges, the paintings emerge, as it were, making chords, scales, and intricate passages. The instrument has many potentialities, some of which I would recommend only to the whimsical. It's possible, for example, to set the bridges up so that one can play the whole of Yankee Doodle from beginning to end with a single stroke of the pick from top to bottom. Now the 2 remaining instruments in this here. I call this instrument the spoils of war because one important section of it is made up of brass artillery casings from a war surplus store. It's a collection of percussion sounds, 2 cloud chamber bowls, a deep-toned wood block, a high-toned wood block, and a piece of spring steel controlled by a pedal that I call a whang gun. The player is Mike Donzella. The remaining instrument is the Surrogate Kithara. 2 small resonators, 8 strings on each. Because of the shape of the instrument and the horizontal strings, it lends itself to a percussion technique. The player is Jack McKenzie. Now listen to a short passage on the Surrogate Kithara and the spoils of war together. Here we have a combination, in a limited musical sense, of somewhat unusual sounds through the ear and a somewhat unusual sight through the eye, combined in a single dramatic purpose, the art of playing. I began building unusual instruments some 30 years ago. Why? I might give many reasons, all over involved, all over simplified. Because I wanted to make music and the playing of instruments a dramatic act. Because I needed sounds for my music beyond my immediate and practical work. Perhaps because I am something of a congenital rebel in the realm of the spirit, though I do not think without a cause. I determined on a basic source scale of 43 tones to the octave. However, the number of tones in my source scale is truly a small part of a larger purpose. I'll explain briefly. Before the Christian era in the West and all over the world at the present time, music and drama were and are one. They were and are one egg, let us say, in one casing of shell. But in the West, hundreds of years ago, they became separate things. And so for a long, long time, we have had a theater which dedicated itself to the production of yolks and a long line of custards, and a music which dedicated itself to the production of whites and a long line of angel food cakes. In the nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men could never put him together again. His white ran off in one direction and his yoke rolled off in the other. I would say that both opera and musical comedy fall into the roles of all the king's horses and all the king's men. In their characteristic ways, they are trying to put Humpty Dumpty together again. Now, I don't propose to do anything about Humpty Dumpty at all. I propose to fertilize a new egg, a new whole egg, a reborn Humpty Dumpty, if you will. This spring at the University of Illinois Festival of Contemporary Arts, a work of mine had its first performance, The Bewitched, a dance satire, one of the results of this fertilization. The ensemble was recruited from the students and faculty of the University of Illinois, John Garvey, the conductor, the voice of the witch, Frida Schell. And so I finally returned to my original theme about the blocking of the direct path between the ears, and in the adventurous detour, discovering that the senses of sight and sound can revolve around a single dramatic axis, and thus bring about a total response. Nothing is of much value to us unless it is enhanced by perception. And in order to bring perception to the dramatic motivation of the Bewitched, I want to take a look at the contemporary musical scene. It is a strange one indeed. The student who is seriously interested in music goes to school and is ushered into a world that has its spiritual inspiration in Middle Europe of the 18th century. Here his mind is focused on the forms and concepts of that place and day, theory, analysis, interpretation. Another person, he may or may not be considered a student, finds himself in a very different kind of music. He joins a dance band, employs a distinctly verbal language, and learns that the most important thing in life is to blow. If his world has a spiritual inspiration, it is to be found in Africa, New Orleans, the West Indies. These two diametric musics coexist. They use the same instruments much of the time, the same notation, yet outwardly each comes very close to pretending that the other doesn't exist at all. And in such a situation, a lot of insignificant people can get lost in the cracks, the lost people. And I am certain that I am one of them, belong in neither musical world. Their heads are bathed in an ancient light from a European Gothic window, while their rumps swing like miniature suspension bridges in a cool African gale. But it is given to the lost people to see and understand in flashes of enlightenment, where people who belong and are well satisfied are not so likely to see. This assumption, a belief in the power of the lost musicians to induce perception in others, is the basis for the dramatic motivation of the Bewitched. In the prologue, the lost musicians wander on stage one at a time. They establish a beat. It's all they've got, and they make the most of it. begins to swing. And out of it grows a kind of magic, a magical power. Then a spirit, the spirit of a prehistoric witch, from the time when people were closer to nature and the magic of nature. Knowing that something supernatural is about to take place, the chorus of displaced musicians play a percussive flourish. Musicians suddenly find that they are actors in the drama they have created. They murmur, sing, shout, whistle, stamp their feet. The prehistoric witch materializes and becomes the collective will of the lost musicians. The witch surveys the world and immediately becomes sad and moody, as who wouldn't? The voice seems to murmur, everybody wants background music. But even when it says, the The conspiratorial tone is obvious. Of displaced musicians decide to do something spectacular with their magical power. They decide to produce modern scenes with modern people and all the modern bewitchments, and at the appropriate psychological moments to introduce lightning flashes of prehistoric perception. There are 10 scenes, each with these elements. First, the evidence of bewitchment. Second, the violent unwitching. Third, the resolution. The episode that you will see contains a broader implication than its title suggests. It is concerned with the modern bewitchment of a nervous compulsion. In dance, it will show how a man pursues an object or a goal, and how this compulsive act itself creates a form which pursues him just as relentlessly as he pursues. In the pedestrian life of the day-to-day world, this spinning triangle must finally end in tragedy. But in the magic of this scene, the witch and the chorus of displaced musicians cause a sudden transformation. And in the climax, in a flash of understanding at the end, the man sees himself through the ludicrous, through even a bit of slapstick. This is scene 3, choreographed by Kim. The romancing of a pathological liar comes to an inspired end.